Bold Predictions, Chapter 24 tonight. What do you believe so steadfastly that you would bet your own money on? Well, we got one here now. Jesse wanted to make this one, I think, a 9.5 on the boldness scale. I went 9.25. Nathan, first up with the prediction. He said Georgia's defense going to be better statistically than last year after the regular season. Last year's defense was basically impenetrable. Only one team in the country scored more than 17 on them, and that was Bama in the SEC title game. This is not going to happen. So this is not realistic. This is a 9.25 on the boldness scale, and the only reason I didn't make it a 10 is because that's how much I respect Kirby Smart. Georgia last year, number one in points per game. Also, how about this? We've never had a stat from 538, but Jesse, producer Jesse, Stats and Info, brings me my research packet. According to 538, Georgia had the second highest defensive efficiency rating for a title team since 2005. So that's pretty good. But more readily available in your memory is watching them lose 5 guys on defense to the first round of the draft. And that doesn't include Nakobe Dean, and that doesn't include some more guys who went, and that doesn't include transfer portal departures like Kimber and Brini. And so I say all that to say this Georgia team can fall short of last year and still be the best defense in the country. I think they will fall short of last year. And that's also why, hey, I think offense could be as much the core identity of Georgia football this year as it has been under Kirby Smart so far. That means we're going to be watching, like vintage Big 12 pinball offense, but I do think that there'll be a little more explosivity. I think also, we're going to talk about this later in the show, Kirby Smart's got exactly what he wants there this year. Next up, what do they have in Madison? At No Director Colin hit us up. And I love the profile picture, by the way. He said Wisconsin goes 11-1 this year and becomes the first Big Ten East school to win the conference title since 2012. Yes, it hasn't happened up there. This is an 8.5. You know what? I'm changing my mind. I'm going to make this a 9. This is unlikely. Not impossible, but very unlikely. My initial thought, and maybe your initial thought when you hear someone predict Wisconsin's going to win the Big Ten is, oh, they could do that. Wisconsin's good. And that's true. They can do it because they are good. Problem is it takes more than good to win the Big Ten championship. It takes being either really good or great, especially with a team like Ohio State presumably in the way. Now, we thought that last year, and they weren't even in the Big Ten title game. But they weren't because someone better than them beat them. So stands to reason you're going to face a buzzsaw one way or the other because you're going to face a playoff-bound team in the Big Ten championship game. Wisconsin, conference schedule this year. They go on the road to Ohio State. They play them in the regular season. They go on the road to Michigan State, at Iowa, at Nebraska. They end the season at home against Minnesota. Graham Mertz last year at quarterback, more interceptions than touchdowns. I'm trying to find the inspiration because I happen to be favorable in feelings towards Wisconsin. Bought into them a time or two over the past couple of years. Really haven't gotten a return on my emotional investment. There's only one top 25 recruiting class baked into their past 5 cycles. That's not the end-all be-all at Wisconsin. They're very much a developmental program. They absolutely are comfortable in what their identity is. That's why I think they can make it to Indianapolis. Winning, once you get there, whole different ballgame. Their over-under win total is 9 this year, but their odds to win the Big Ten championship are at plus 1,000. So I make that a 9 on the boldness scale. I think this one's pretty bold. I think our next one's pretty bold. At Gatorfellow said UCLA will be one of 2 teams in the Pac-12 conference championship game, and USC will not be the other one. So we need the Bruins to make it to the conference title game. They don't face USC. Now, it should be noted here that even though they're in the same division, quote unquote, Pac-12 changed their rules. So they're just taking the top 2 teams for the title game. So yes, both of those Los Angeles schools could face each other, but our man here says it's not going to happen. So I made this an 8.25. We're going by quarters now, 8.25. UCLA is in a pretty sneaky good position here. You're looking at the odds to win the Pac-12 if you're watching on YouTube. They are 4th overall at plus 750. Oregon, Utah, USC are 3-2-1. They were 8-4 last year, were the UCLA Bruins. They've been so-so recruiting, but they did have the number 9 portal class, so they made some good transfer portal additions. This is the opportune moment, though. More so than any of the stats I can give you, just think about the overall nature of the Pac-12. You've got Well, you got roster churn and coaching staff churn across town at USC. You've got the same thing up the road a good ways, a really good ways, in Eugene, Oregon. Further up the road, you got that at Washington. So, yeah, Utah's there. Utah's got to come to your building. You don't have to go to Salt Lake. So if UCLA is going to get it done, I think this would be the year. Also, the good news for them, listen to this. Bowling Green, Alabama State, South Alabama, at Colorado. Those are their first 4 games. What more could you want? And they've got they got really good veteran pieces at important offensive positions, i.e. quarterback, running back, etc. So they're going to be tuned up. I mean, Washington on September 30th is really the first game, and it gets serious really quickly after that. But that's the first game where you look and you say, all right, that's really where you got to have things figured out. I think they'll have them figured out by then. So the reason why I made this an 8 is not so much because I doubt UCLA can make it to the Pac-12 championship game. You got to have USC not there. So we've got multiple qualifiers here, and I just think statistically, that's one of those improbable but not impossible classic 8s on the boldness scale. Chip Kelly needs this one this year, though. Next up, we go all the way across the country. 3 more letters here. Here's the prediction. Haven't been hearing much about North Carolina lately, so here we go. North Carolina is going to win the ACC. And a bolder prediction, why not? They go to the playoff, watching from Lincolnton, Georgia, home of the Red Devils and home of Garrison Hurst. This is a 9 for me. A lot of you got burned by North Carolina last year. I'm a victim right there along with you. They have the 6th best odds to win the ACC this year. So that alone indicates that this is pretty bold. 6th best odds to win the conference title. But not only do we need them to win the conference title, we need them to make the playoff. I've got some odds for them to win the title here at plus 15,000 if you want some of that. Here are Mac Brown's records so far at North Carolina. 7-6, 8-4, 6-6. What leads you to believe there is a 1-loss miracle run to a conference title and a playoff in this? Undefeated or 1 loss, that's what you're going to need. What makes you think it's there? You've got turnover at quarterback here, which I'm not saying it's a catastrophic loss, but I am saying there's a lot of unknown on that team. Maybe they do have it all figured out. Hey, I'm a believer that they're going to hit the over on their win total, which is 7.5 for the record. But see, notice what I said, over 7.5, which means I'm good with 8-4. 9-3 would be a great year. Making the playoff, though, that's an entirely different deal. I don't think that's in the cards for them this year. So Brandon Walker claims I never say anything bad. Here's a prediction. I don't think North Carolina is going to make the playoff in 2022. It gets no bolder than that. It's a 9. No, I don't actually listen to him. Someone told me he said that. Lastly, let's go to State College, PA. Dave said, Penn State, my prediction, they have another above-average season, and people truly question the new James Franklin contract. This one's worded in an interesting manner. Let me read it again. Penn State, another above-average season, and people are going to question the James Franklin contract. Well, their over-under win total is 8.5. So what would we call above average? Would it have to be 9 wins? 8 or 9 wins, I guess, would be an above-average season. Let's call it 9. If they win 9 games this year, there's no way anyone's questioning anything. That's not happening. So they would have to be below average for people to start questioning him. Because even if you start questioning it, let's assume for a second they have a bad year this year. They go 7-5. No, you wouldn't be happy. But questioning the contract is something no one's in a position to do up there. Because you can't use the benefit of hindsight to go back in time and claim that something was the wrong decision. Because when they made the decision on the contract, they didn't have a magic 8 ball. So they wouldn't have known 7-5 was coming up, for example. Had they known that, maybe they handled the contract differently. But the other thing you have to remember is at the time, what was the landscape out there? Tons of coaching drama. That was the landscape. And did James Franklin capitalize on that? Sure he did. Did he get a little bit more money out of the deal? Sure he did. Could you afford to call his bluff if you're Penn State? Of course you couldn't. And so they made the right decision regardless of what he does this year. So let's say they go 7-5 this year. What's going to happen is, well, logically, what would happen is people will say, this is not good enough. And James Franklin would agree, I know it's not good enough. And then you would look to the future, because here's what you do have at Penn State that maybe has not been in nearly as plentiful a supply lately. You got real legit hope at the quarterback spot in Drew Aller and Nicholas Singleton, whereas you may have to wait a year to see Aller. I don't think you're going to wait a season. I think Nick Singleton is going to be a big-time player for them at running back this year. Point being, you go 8 or 9 wins this year. Let's just say that's what the record is. You come out of this season, unlike years past, saying, boy, now it's going to get better at quarterback. Now our offense is going to get better, or at least we have a reason to believe that. That hasn't been what you've said in the past. So there'll be hope. So if they go 6 wins, it's a different conversation. I don't think Penn State's going 6-6. So I think they'll be okay there. Hope, a good thing, maybe the best of things.